This is the breaking news coming out of Qatar and the United States of America.
Really a very important mission. And I told Pete we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military. Because we're going into Chicago very soon. That's a big city with an incompetent governor. Stupid governor, stupid.
Using American cities as training grounds for the United States military. That was part of President Trump's partisan address yesterday to hundreds of America's top military leaders at a Marine Corps base in Quantico, Virginia. Joining us now, MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Mark Hergling. Good morning to you both. General, I'll start with you and just your reaction. I'm sure you've talked to some of your old colleagues, maybe who are in the room or some who just watched at home. What was the reaction to that spectacle yesterday?
Yeah, Willie, I did talk to a few. Many people in that room I've served with. I didn't retire that long ago, so some of those senior members were junior members when I was still in the service. What was interesting is it came about in two parts. First of all, Secretary Hegseth's address. I took notes as he spoke as I was watching it. And just some of the things that I made bullet points about were Liberation Day, kill things and break people, or kill people and break things, war crimes, Geneva Convention elimination, rules of engagements are unnecessary, suggesting women can't meet the standards, returning to the days of drill sergeants smoking recruits during basic training, suggesting the elimination of IG actions, especially as he's being investigated for the use of signal apps by those IGs. Hawking his own book at the end, The War on Warriors, I've read, and it's a compilation of thoughts from a disgruntled soldier who has very little understanding of strategic implications of various actions. Then when it turned to the president, you've already addressed this, meandering. Just all sorts of issues, much like the UN speech he gave. So many things to talk about from that speech, but the war from within, as you just mentioned, and putting soldiers on American streets to train how to react to different enemies from within were two of the highlights that I wrote down. And it was just a combination of two things that I believe were leading to what we might see next. And the other thing I'd say is President Trump thrives on applause and cheering and interactions with an audience. And when he didn't get that and instead got quiet professionalism from the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines in the audience, that likely rattled them from the very beginning. And that silence wasn't disrespect. It was restraint and discipline and adherence to the oath of office. Yesterday was, to me, a collective reminder of our professional culture that we have in the military that transcends politics. It was on full display, and it was interesting to watch from both sides of the audience.
It was the oath to the Constitution, not to the man standing in front of them. So can you speak, General, just for people watching this morning who have so much coming at them 24 hours a day, why this you view as so unusual and so dangerous to be talking about using American cities as, quote, training grounds for the American military and having the United States military go in and effectively do domestic policing of gangs and whatever else Donald Trump wants them to do?
Well, primarily, Willie, is because it's illegal. And it violates our oath of office to defend the Constitution, which says the military is not to be used. Specifically, that was put in the Constitution against securing American streets, other than when there is an insurrection within the Republic, which President Lincoln saw. But the indications are people are asking us to prepare to do that. So that means there's measures afoot to try and make that happen. Because I don't see it, and you can bet that all the 400 or 800 people in that audience, the generals and the senior enlisted advisors, don't see it either. And many of them have seen conflict. They have been involved in war. They know what it's like, and they also know you don't take up arms against innocent civilians, especially ones in the United States who are executing their First Amendment rights of free speech and protesting against the government.
General, I don't know whether you've seen the front page of the Wall Street Journal today. I'm now holding it up on camera. There's a photo shot of the front rows of many of the former
members, your former friends in the military, sitting there watching and listening to the spectacle yesterday. And I too spoke to several of your colleagues, former colleagues, yesterday. And the word I kept hearing from them was embarrassment. Because if you look at that picture and you listen or have viewed what happened yesterday in Quantico, you saw myriad numbers of Silver Star awards. You saw myriad Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, Combat Infantry badges, and they were being lectured on how to do push-ups and lose weight and shave, and it was truly mortifying. But the larger question is, going forward, what happens to the military in this country when there's so much disarray within the building, the Pentagon, where the Defense Department is housed, and various components of the military around the globe, with this internal dissension that you can seemingly feel when you witness an event like yesterday?
Yeah, it struck me too, Mike, that when you look at those faces, it's what I predicted when I was on the show the other day. And that you're going to get poker faces and a stoicism that was reflective of professionalism. But truthfully, those individuals will leave that room or left that room yesterday, and they'll start discussing and analyzing how they can implement some of the lawful orders that they got. Okay, great. We can buck up the standards. We can take a look at the kinds of things to get some soldiers, not all, certainly not even the majority, back in better shape. Take a look at what our ranks look like. But there were also soldiers and all ranks of services in that audience that said, wait a minute, when they were writing down the same kind of checklist that I was writing down, saying, wait a minute, we can't do that, or we shouldn't do that, or this is a true violation of what we are as professionals, or hey, I've got women in my ranks who are performing admirably. Why should I kind of lump them all together like the secretary did? Or I'm certainly now going to debate with myself, what am I going to say if I'm asked to go on the street and conduct illegal actions? And I guarantee you that the people in that audience will not execute illegal orders. We've been saying that for a long time. But at the same time, all of them, not only were they personally embarrassed, but they were embarrassed for their services that had to, sit in that audience and listen to this kind of stuff. That's the worst part of all this. There's a saying in the military that's a great leadership dictum. You praise in public and you discipline in private. This was a disciplinary approach in public with cameras so the whole nation could see. And it was an attempt at separating the military institution from the people that they defend. And I don't think it worked very well, but I'm sure there's a lot of people questioning what the military will do next. I'm sure of what they will do next. They will make sure they don't follow illegal orders and maintain their
job.
Watch what peanuts do to your waistline.
Celery with peanut butter. Peanut butter is one of the worst foods that you could.
Like yesterday.
They'll do their job. General, there was such an extraordinary misreading of the room by Pete Hegseth and the President of the United States, who have absolutely no idea who they were talking to. I understand Pete Hegseth served, and I'm grateful for his service in uniform to this country. But I do wonder how they could have so badly misread the room. I kept thinking, watching them yesterday, just how Bush League it was, and how those generals and those admirals afterwards were just shaking their heads going, my God, what a clown show. And that's what they were thinking. That's what so many people in the military, even if members of the military support the president, and there are a good number that do support the president, this sort of speech and doing this with generals and admirals, Bush League. I want to talk about the culture really quickly before we let you go, just to explain to viewers something that I was blessed to be able to see when I was a member of the Armed Services Committee for 4 terms. I got a chance to see generals and admirals up close, to figure out what drove them. And it was, of course, a love of country. But as I was saying to some people in 2020, when they're saying, oh, no, the military, Donald Trump's going to get the military, they're going to rise up and they're going to keep Donald Trump in power. I said, no, you don't understand the military. They will not do that. And I said, for several reasons. But as I've always said, and I'd like you to explain this, there's a peer pressure in all the right way, because every general and every admiral has a mentor who's a retired general and a retired admiral. And I always saw when one stepped out of line, this band of brothers would come together. And they were always looking. I had chief of staffs of the Air Force. And I had them looking to their retired generals, or in the Navy, retired admirals, for guidance. And that was their audience too. They understood they were duty bound by the Constitution, but also by those whose shoulders they were standing on in their position. Can you please talk about that just for a minute, to explain that this is so much more than just a room of 800 military leaders? There's a collective room, really, the spirit of teaching them duty, honor, and country, of tens of thousands of people still with us and no longer with us, that are guiding those generals and admirals.
Yeah, Joe, I'd love to talk about that for a second. First of all, I'll shout out to my mentors. I've got about 5 of them. The biggest one is General Fred Franks, who was a 4-star general when I was a young major working for him. He took me under his wing. He's still living, and a great example. Lost a leg in Vietnam and understands, and rose to the rank of 4-star when he was commanding Desert Storm. John Abizaid, who many people know from his service, Rick Shinseki. I could go on and on again, the guys who mentored me throughout, and I mentor a few others, and the few that I mentor were contacting me last night. Barry McCaffrey, who you're going to have on in a little while, was also one of my mentors. That's a core of the professional force. What is also important to know, to address the points that you made, is the military is a profession. It is not a business. They don't get paid very much, but they do it for something bigger than themselves that no one else in the society could do. That's an element of a profession. Another element of a profession is they have a professional code of ethics and values, which are embedded in each individual. A third element of a profession is that fellow professionals discipline and even dismiss others within the profession if they violate the norms of the profession, which gets to what you're talking about. So those are 3 of the 5 elements of a profession which hold us together tightly and cause the military to do things differently. And the last one is the caring for soldiers. The big part about what we're seeing today is not loyalty just to the oath of office, but it's also loyalty to those we lead, and a shared trust between the leaders and the led. And those men and women in the room yesterday cannot let their soldiers or Marines or airmen or sailors down in terms of standing up for them and what right looks like. So you've hit a very good point. That's what makes us very different.
You guys might want to sit down for this. You're not going to like the numbers I'm about to give you. So the United States just hit a record low for infant fertility. Record low of all time since we've ever been tracking it. So every woman of childbearing age is giving birth to just under 1.6 babies. Just enough to replace us, okay? The lowest ever. And we know why that is. We just don't have a country that makes it easy for women to have that choice and to not have the stress of worrying about access to health care, finances, and you name it, right? Right. This is true of most other countries in Europe, and you name it. Their birth rates are declining. except for one country. One country has a strong growth. Can you guess which country? Israel. 3 babies for every female of childbearing age. And you'd be happy to know how heavily subsidized everything is. When you have a baby, the mother automatically gets a check. And then that baby gets a monthly deposit in the mom's bank account every single month until that child turns 18. And then in addition, that child has a separate account where the government deposits money that gets put aside for investments and so forth. And then, of course, their health care is heavily subsidized and college is heavily subsidized. And it's just wonderful that they have that money, thanks to you and me. When you see those New York City mayor candidates during the Democratic primary all say, where's the first place they would go visit if they were elected? And they all said Israel. And Zohran Mamdani said, I would go right back to New York City because that's who I'm trying to make life affordable for. Yeah, we don't get those things here. We don't get those things here. And what this extreme right regime, per Project 2025, is going to attempt to do to boost up those birth rates is not make it financially affordable and heavily subsidize everything, because we can't. We're not taxing corporations and we're not taxing the wealthy. We need that money. They're hoarding it all. What they're going to do is continue to erode our access to birth control. As a matter of fact, the only thing that Republicans have put forward right now to boost the fertility rates is to make IVF treatment more affordable. That money, though, we are sending to Israel. We don't get it. Like, we're just being used. We're being used by so many different entities, it's not even funny. Vote in the primaries, Democratic primaries. Vote the pro-Israel candidates out. We need to start looking out for ourselves, and we need candidates who are going to help us do that.
To all you little troublemakers and all you little shits over there in Portland, Oregon, finished, done, it's over. National Guard has been sent in. Antifa, hate groups, anybody running around attacking ICE agents, you're finished. It's over. And my suggestion is go back home, get back into your rooms over there, because most of you still live with your parents. Get back to school and start getting an education, because the anarchy and the way that you've been overturning and overrunning city is now in the hands of Donald J. Trump. To all my MAGA supporters that have to suffer through living in the beautiful state of Oregon and have to deal with all the troublemakers in Portland, you are so very, very welcome. That it was our honor to send the National Guard in on behalf of our president, Donald Trump. Arrests will be made. People will be held accountable. If you are committing crimes over there, you will be held responsible to the fullest extent of the law. To the useless mayor of Portland, Oregon, and the incompetent governor over there that cannot guarantee the safety and security for all of their people, do us all a favor and just step down and go away. The Republican Party, Donald Trump's troops, National Guard, MAGA Nation, we've got it from here.
New Mexico is really a split screen right now. In Washington, D.C., you have a Republican-controlled Congress and White House that is refusing to negotiate to keep the government open, to keep our federal workers employed, and refusing to fix the healthcare of millions of Americans who will lose healthcare in the coming weeks if they don't act. And meanwhile, you have a Democratic-led state legislature and governor who have called a special session today to try to fix what Republicans broke at the federal level. And I have to say that I couldn't be prouder to be a New Mexican and prouder of our state leaders who are stepping up to the plate in a way that no other state in the United States is right now. In this special session that they're holding starting today, they are planning to address as much as our state is capable, the healthcare needs of New Mexicans, the food assistance needs of New Mexicans. They want to shore up public broadcasting funding and to make sure that New Mexicans are okay as we face these extremely difficult and uncertain times. That's what leadership looks like. People who care about and are here as elected officials to fight for the people. And that is what you see in the New Mexico delegation. All 5 of us are here in Washington, D.C. We showed up to do our jobs this week, while the Republicans are a complete dereliction of duty. Now, some of the other members have already talked about how we got here, but I want to just break it down a little bit more. The normal process for passing a budget begins at the beginning of the year. The president transmits a budget request. It's supposed to go through appropriations hearings. It's supposed to get passed in both chambers, and you're supposed to have a budget enacted before the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th. But they failed to do their most constitutional duty. It is literally the constitutional duty of Congress to keep the federal government funded. And the Republicans has spent their entire year working on a domestic policy package that gutted healthcare for tens of millions of Americans, that took away food assistance from children and from hurting families, that took away educational assistance and Pell Grants from countless Americans, and that gave permanent tax breaks to billionaires on the backs of hardworking Americans and cost American taxpayers $4 trillion in deficit spending. So we need to be clear that this shutdown is not a blame game. This shutdown is intentional. The Republicans spent their entire time and political capital to give permanent tax breaks to their donors and their buddies, and they have very little disregard for the American people. You've already heard what the president actually said to Democrats when they approached the president to try to cut a bipartisan agreement to keep the government open. They are not taking this seriously. They are not engaging in good faith. And I just want to point out the mechanics here. That if the Republicans actually intended to keep the government open, the Speaker of the House would not have canceled votes this week because it was on the congressional schedule since the beginning of the year. He would have asked his members to come back to Washington, D.C., and they would have kept the House of Representatives open because you cannot pass a deal unless it goes through both chambers. And not only did they shut down the House, Mike Johnson told his members not to come back to Washington, D.C. So even though they're putting up votes on the Senate floor as we speak and are going to make our senators vote over and over again on a deal that we never agreed to, the House is shut down, and these Republican House members are not even physically in Washington, D.C. to negotiate a deal. So it's really clear that they are planning this shutdown. They wanted this shutdown. And if you needed any further evidence of that today, just an hour ago, the Republican House members held a Zoom meeting for their Republican caucus, and OMB's director, Russell Vought, got on their Zoom call and told them that he was going to start issuing mass firings of federal employees within the next 2 days. So they are using this as a pretext to carry out their agenda. They have been planning for this for months, but they are trying to create an elaborate smokescreen that makes the American people think that they're trying to act when everything that they've done has set the mechanics up for a shutdown so that they can carry out their policies that they laid out in Project 2025.
This is the breaking news coming out of Qatar and the United States of America involving Iran, the Middle East, and of course Israel. Okay, here is the news. President Trump have signed an executive order with the Iraqi leader that any attack on Qatar will be regarded as a security threat. The news stated that the executive order that was signed today by President Donald Trump and the Qatari's chief supreme leader, it states that any attack on Qatar will be automatically regarded as an attack on the United States security interests. What does that mean? That executive order means that any attack on Qatar will be regarded as economical, security-wise, and a diplomatic attack on the United States automatically. But that is not even the main thing. The main thing is that this is a blueprint that the Trump and Netanyahu's genocidal states are planting, so that when they attack Iran through Qatari's base, or using Qatar as the place where they park their F-35 or F-52 or F-51 fighter jets that will strike Iran. If Iran retaliates and strike by Qatar, it will give Donald Trump and his rogue country an ammunition and a reason to actually start a war with Iran, a direct war with Iran, the same they have with Afghanistan and Iraq. So this is a blueprint for an automatic US involvement with the war with Iran on behalf of Israel, because we all know Israel alone cannot defeat Iran. Israel will be wiped out the face of the planet within 48 hours if Israel try to fight Iran alone. But because of course they need their daddy in hand, Netanyahu need his boyfriend in hand to help him to come and fight the war, so it's forcing Donald Trump to sign an executive order that states that any attack on Qatar military base, after it was Israel that initially attacked Qatar, it will be regarded as an attack on United States security interests. Think twice. What do you think about this move? Let me know in the comment section, okay? If you haven't followed the page, make sure you follow the page. Until next time, peace. The date is here.
Black Americans, foundational Black Americans, or as I like to refer to us as like the Black Anglo-Americans, have more WASP ancestry than the current president. Truly, while yes, the Black American ethnic group was the result of brutalization and racial admixture, at the same time that Trump's ancestors or Melania's ancestors were in Europe, they were peasants, and many of ours were part of the upper class Southern American gentry. These were the people of power, these were the founding fathers, these were the framers, these were the upper class Southern gentry, these were the planter class. So for many of you who don't know what the term WASP means, it stands for White Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and that was the upper class of the early days of America. Not only contain that WASP ancestry, but we have held on to many of the WASP traditions, and they're present in a lot of the social norms of Black America that many people just don't even recognize to be directly from the WASP tradition. Saying daddy to refer to your father was a very sort of like 1800s form of intimacy that was rooted in white Anglo-Saxon Protestant America, sort of like a play on like mummy, mommy, daddy. That was something that the like white upper class elite would do to refer to their father, in contrast to like pa or ma that was perceived in the context of like the working class. A lot of times Black Americans say daddy, like that's my daddy. Daddy is WASP. And then making the difference, and like a lot of old like Southern Blacks say, you know, like in daddy, Bernice King, daddy told me, or like no, Dr. King would even say a lot of times like my daddy, like my grandfather says like that was my mama and that was my daddy. Like, a lot of Black Americans might refer to their aunt as auntie or like aunt. Aunt is WASP, that elongated aunt, that is a white Anglo-Saxon pronunciation. A lot of times, a lot of Black families, mine didn't have this, but they believed in a lot of like the upper class Black families believe in children should be seen and not heard and stay in a child's place. All of that is old WASP American traditions. Sunday's best, wearing like your best suit and tie to church. A lot of women, Black women, wear big hats. Like my grandma is the hat lady. She never goes to church without wearing a big hat. She loved Princess Diana because of her hats. Diana was a WASP. Jack and Jill and, respectability politics. And, a lot of black people, will pride themselves on using, like, going above and beyond to speak very well. And I'll drop a part in a minute. And a lot of these are often seen in more Southern traditions. But the American South is the motherland of Black America, not Africa. But you'll oftentimes hear like a lot of black people saying things like pecans instead of pecans, pecan, upper class. And many Black Americans knew that how successful you were at navigating the white caste system and your black upward mobility and how palatable of a black person you were not only determined your success, but your survival in many ways. Even kind of like a little shady, like that mixes with AAVE, like clutching the pearls. All of that is all in lockstep with AAVE and WASP traditions, and that's why there is a like rooted sort of desire in part to receive education and whatnot, because the early Black Americans knew how impactful WASP society was on the Black elite and Black like classism, which is a different topic for a different day. But also because once, many of the hierarchies or like structures of Black America were dismantled that were solely rooted in colorism, then class was a major factor in terms of like your assimilation within Black American culture. Like who are your folks? What family do you come from? Like what part and what do you do? How do you do? WASP traditions. That's why Black Americans get so like offended when like other non-Black people try to use Black scent or like cast it off as like AAVE and they appropriate that, because for one, most Black Americans just don't talk like that, and it's almost like a minstrelized version of a sort of like caricature of Black talk. Yes, both this sort of like upper form of Black speech and AAVE are both grounded in Black America and are both important and are both a part of the Black American tradition. Or like if we're angry, we might get like very pedantic and be like I'm going to the store right now. Like that's all rooted in like WASP Anglo-Saxon traditions. Now for me, part of it is because I have like a slight autistic accent because I'm ADHD, but another big part of it though is because like Black Americans raised their children on old Southern traditions that were WASP traditions.
Something that I will never understand about the United States, it's how as a society you guys have accepted that walking places that are walking distance makes you look poor. Sure, you guys don't make it easy, like over here walking through parking lots, but still I think walking shows how you prioritize being outside, how you are healthy enough to get steps in, how just you don't care about what other people think. If you want to walk places, just walk. But I think a lot of you get stuck on what other people think and you just quit doing things just because of fear of other people's opinion. But who cares? Not me, for sure.
If the foreigner doesn't benefit the fucking country, they shouldn't be here. What you're getting at there is a question of ideology. You just said yourself, we don't want to be the person that's anti-immigration. Well, why not? What makes you feel like there's anything wrong with being the person who's anti-immigration? The problem is that we've been socially acculturated, right, to believe that immigration is like a human right, that immigration is a good thing, that immigration is democracy. Fuck that! Fuck that! That's not why immigration was invented. Immigration was invented because countries needed to survive, so they needed to bring in skilled workers from other countries, or they needed to bring in labor-intensive workers from other countries to do jobs that the local skilled workforce couldn't do. That's it. That's why immigration exists. It's not supposed to be fair and just, and we're here to help people, and we want to make sure that refugees have a safe place. No, that's all political bullshit. That's all stuff that you feed a stupid citizenship to make them feel like we're doing the right thing by letting foreigners into our country. If the foreigner doesn't benefit the fucking country, they shouldn't be here. There's some other place they can go where they can benefit that country there, but that country isn't here. So when you're bringing in people who are unskilled, uneducated, and then when they come here, they also don't acculturate to your country, that's not an immigrant. That's a transplant. That's a person who's just bringing their culture, their life, their society to you to feed off of you, to feed off of your land and your taxes and your benefits to help them, not the other way around. And that's not me being anti-immigration. I am all for immigration. I come from a country that was built on the backs of immigrants who had something special and they gave it to the country that they moved to. That's completely different than giving safe haven to a bunch of broke and poor people because you feel like it's the nice thing to do.
Remember when Trump says we don't need any immigrants and went into Georgia and deported all those Koreans? 475 of them in the largest ICE raid ever. It was all over the news. They were all working undocumented on tourist visas, Estes visas, maybe even some overstayed on their visas. And then South Korea said, we're not investing in the United States anymore. You just deported 475 of our workers, and the $350 billion that we were investing in the U.S. is gone. Well, I guess money talks. And I guess Trump realized these factories don't run without immigrants. So now there's a sudden reversal. Those very same workers who got deported, they're coming back now. And they're allowed to come and work on tourist visas and ESTA visas. Anybody else who came to the airport and said, hey, I'm here to work at a factory on my tourist visa, they would be deported for misrepresentation on their visa, never to be allowed back in the United States again. But apparently in America 2025, we got double standards. When it helps Trump politically, immigrants are scapegoats. But when it helps the economy and Trump realizes we need immigrants to run this economy, welcome back and work on any visa you want. The truth is, this is a huge hypocrisy. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm Brad Bernstein. I'm an immigration lawyer in New York City.